technology these days. Wonderful. I understand that we are now live on YouTube, so welcome. We didn't start without you, YouTubers. So welcome to those of you that are in our Zoom webinar with us today. And welcome to those of you who have joined us on YouTube. And so appreciate you checking in on our first fall 2020 Mesa College Community Forum. And as some of you may know that have that tuned in for our convocation, or for those of you that are new, we are committed to holding these community forums twice a month on these Tuesday afternoons as ways to stay connected as a community, and also as some opportunities for professional learning together around issues that we believe are truly important to the development for all of us and to the benefit of outcomes for our students. So again, thank you so much for joining us. What we're going to be doing today is I'm going to give a brief update. I may call on a VP or two to give you a highlight if it so moves me. They're ready to go. And then we are going to continue the conversation that we started at convocation about our work in racial equity, and specifically what Mesa College to do to step into this work around anti-Blackness for our campus and our college community. So I thank Manuel Velez and Leroy Johnson and Takima Mayasa and sorry about that. All of our panelists today, truly appreciate that you're here with us, and look forward to our conversation today. So your panelists will be here in just a moment, and I'll also be joined again by Janae Johnson, our wonderful professional learning coordinator, will help me do the facilitation. Thank you to Cloris so much for joining us. Cloris is the chair of our Classified Professionals Equity Task Force, and always appreciate your voice in the work. So thank you so much for being here. All right, well, let's get going. As you know all too well, it is the second week of the semester at Mesa College. And I just want to start with a thank you. I continue to be absolutely grateful and feel, as I like to say on Twitter, #blessed to be leading this institution. So many of you are spending hours and hours, whether you are a faculty member trying to hone your skills in the classroom, or whether you are a student who's doing your best to try to make sure you're logged into all the places you should be logged in. You're a counselor making sure our students can get in and get what they need. You're a promise person who's helping students make sure they stay eligible for promise. You're one of our coaches who's trying to figure out how to keep our athletes engaged with us, even though our competitive sports aren't performing in the fall. There's so many roles that people are playing right now, and I know that you're all wearing many hats. So I just want to say to you, thank you. And I'm grateful, and I know our institution is grateful. That doesn't mean we're perfect. And so as things bubble up, as things come to the fore and you need help, or you need to commiserate with someone, or whatever that might be, we are certainly all open to being in a community that's honest with each other. We don't have to be perfect all the time, but we always want to try to make sure that we're supporting each other and our students as we move forward. So congratulations on getting our semester off to a good start. And if you're one of our students that's joined us, thank you so much for hanging in there with us, as I think we've done a remarkable job of getting this semester on its way. I also want to say that, we are moving forward with all the areas. Instruction is going well. Isabel and our chairs and our deans and our faculty members, in terms of planning our schedule, it certainly was up, down, and all over the place, trying to figure out what a good schedule would look like for our students this semester. And I so appreciate all of that hard work. To our student services professionals who are doing as much as they can to answer the myriad calls coming in for all different kinds of things that people are needing right now. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm getting text messages, direct tweets, all sorts of fun things that say, please help me. I'm trying to find this human being. I don't know how. And it's not because it's necessarily hard, but we know how to navigate ourselves, but we're not always navigable by other people who don't know our system. So it is labor of love to get everybody connected. But I want to thank everybody. And then also to our wonderful admin services folks, the budgeteers that have been around all summer, still paying the bills and ordering things, and to our folks that have been in the LRC all summer, we're still doing laptop loans, and we're about to launch another set of emergency funds for our students as well. So as those things come up, we will definitely get everybody in the loop. I'm excited to see that our tutors, our MT2C program, that live link right in all of your Canvas shells, I think is just so awesome that students go straight into where they're already in class and able to go in and look for tutoring. I think the more accessible we can be, it's just an amazing opportunity. We do have limited face-to-face classes that are happening in physically distant spaces, only in programs where there is a need to provide that opportunity, either for licensing or because it's an essential worker kind of situation, that we do have some folks that are on campus. I want to thank Jacqueline Collins in particular and our admin services and facilities people. If you're on campus, your temperature is taken, you are given a wristband of the day, so that we know that you've been checked out that day. And if you don't have a wristband on, they will hunt you down. So they somehow know you're on campus, whether you think they do or not. It's to keep everyone safe. So wear your mask, wash your hands. And if you're on campus, of course, you need to go through your administrative structure to make sure that we all know where everybody is and everyone's safe. So with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to call on Lorenze and Ashanti and Isabel and see if there's anything else that you'd like to lift up to folks that they might want to know today as we start our fall semester off.
I'll just jump in with one quick update. I sent an email earlier today, but select offices and student services will be hosting extended hours this Friday. The add drop refund deadline for our primary courses it's Friday. We want to make sure students have access to resources. So if you get questions, concerns, please send them our way. It'll be for admissions, veterans and records, counseling, financial aid, student accounting, and DSPS. You hit on the other highlights. If you have questions, we are constantly updating our online student support services site. So there's all kinds of good information on there, including updates about bus passes and crashing courses and all kinds of very helpful instructions for students. So we have a lot of things in works to make sure that our students have access to support for things like Zoom, how to navigate campus solutions, and a Canvas and all kinds of things. So we'll be sending out that information soon. In light of the topic being discussed today, we just always want to remind people that Student Services has issued a call to action to student services departments. And so we are all actively discussing and thinking about ways that we can remove barriers, in particular for our African-American students. Our Black Faculty Counseling Collaborative is doing a lot of work, including they're going to be focusing on an Ed Plan campaign so that we can make sure that our Black students have a path to, through, and beyond Mesa College. So we're doing a lot of exciting things in all of our departments. The monthly update was circulated last week, so we always encourage you to check that out and find out exactly what we're doing. Too many stories to tell, so I will leave it at that and just say that I'm very excited to be here and to continue this dialogue.
Thank you, Ashanti, and congratulations to Leticia Diaz and our folks in our EOPS program. We were just awarded another 5-year TRIO grant, which will continue our wonderful STAR TRIO program and provide over $1.2 million, I believe, or 1.4 million. I quibble over the hundreds of thousands, and direct support for our students. And that's a legacy that's really amazing for Mesa.
Absolutely. It's 1.7 million. And we also
okay. Better yet.
Angel Foundation grant, $50,000 to support our former foster youth. And San Diego Mesa College, in partnership with City and Miramar, also received a grant to focus on suicide prevention. So we have a lot of exciting activities taking place.
Thank you. And thank you to those of you who are asking where I was. I have little people in my life, and they might have run in behind me just a few minutes ago. You might just get to meet them. So that one way or the other, but they seem to need something that's behind my desk the minute I get on a large meeting. And for those of you who haven't heard this story, last week I was leading a statewide CEO meeting, and one of them announced that there was no toilet paper in the bathroom and that someone was stranded there. So I just want to let you know that humanity happens for all of us. And you know what? It is what it is. Isn't it nice that we get to deal with each other on that human level? I think boundaries, are important, but I think barriers are not. We all have those fun things in our life. So we have restocked all bathrooms, and so hopefully that won't happen again, but you just never know, how it goes. What do they say in Hollywood? Kids and dogs, but anyway, kids and animals, but not that kids are animals, but anyway, you might just get to meet them.
Can I add one more?
Please.
Just want to remind people that we're still doing our mobile drive-through farmers markets. So in addition to encouraging students to participate on the first Monday and the third Thursday of the month, we really are in need of volunteers. You can volunteer for the entire length of time, or you can come out in 2-hour time slots, but we really do need people to volunteer for the event. So when you see the email, please think about trying to get a date on your calendar. And sorry, I thought my camera was off and I'm over here snacking. So sorry if anybody saw that. Okay, goodbye.
Hey, I'm drinking my coffee. I didn't know my mug matched my dress, though. That worked out pretty well. Okay, important things. All right, Isabel or Lorenze, anything you'd like to add before we get cooking in the beautiful Poppy Land there, Isabel?
Yes, hello from Poppy Land. Sounds really exciting. It is exciting. We are working nonstop in instruction. Both got off to a great start. Especially thankful for the Mesa buddies and all our efforts into many areas of instruction. We're going to get a second cohort, so the learning continues, and we're putting it to great use to help our students learn in the best environment possible. We've done a great job, and once again, I appreciate the deans, the chairs, Terry, Monica, coordinating CARES Act kits, building and distribution for our students, anything from a pottery wheel to, some interesting stuff for anatomy class. One reminder is we have a Pathways retreat on September 18th. I believe Dr. Parsons will be sending out a call for that. And just because we're instructing, we are already starting to plan for spring 2021. And our current planning is similar to what we are doing right now in terms of mode of delivery. We don't have direction from the chancellor yet, but that is our planning because our scheduled deadline is October 2nd. So that's what's cooking, and a lot more exciting news, but for the sake of time, I'll just leave it at that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome everyone to the new semester, and along with what our president and my colleagues, the other vice presidents, have mentioned, just that there's so much going on campus, off of campus, in our living rooms, on the edges of our beds. And so I want to give a quick update on Mesa 2030, our educational and facilities master plan. Again, I'm proud of the college to be able to vacillate between the forest and the trees, worrying about everything that's going on right now, and planning for what 10 years in the future will look like on our campus at Mesa. And so our first task force meeting, it will be September 1st. Our extended timeline is now until May. We were hoping to wrap up this year, and now we're going to go into the school year and not the calendar year because of the delays from COVID. And then the interviews that we've done with each program will be collective goals that we've gotten from there. And then from there, we'll look into our facilities to make sure that our capacity meets the overall needs currently, and then seeing what that looks like in the future for our facilities needs as the facility portion of our educational master plan. And then we'll do some long-term planning. And then again, we'll look at some short-term strategic planning, a 5-year plan that'll go along with our 10-year plan. And then before you know it, we'll be back into our normal program review cycle to look annually at how we can better each of our programs as we go. So this large 10 years, what does it look like to, what can we do today and what can we do this year? We'll see all of that come together beautifully in this school year. And then the outline of the document itself, we're seeing how we can make it interactive and fun and focus on equity using pathways. And then we'll have some context setting of what's going on right now as we're creating the plan. Again, what are our current conditions? What are our facilities needs in the future? And then what are our long-term goals collectively? And so all that to say, we're excited to keep moving on with this project. And again, I'm so very proud of the college to be able to do and hold both spaces right now of focusing on our immediate needs, yet also planning for the important future in 2030. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenze. All right. So, and of course, there are so many other things going on. I will tell you that as of this morning, Chancellor Carroll will be putting out another COVID-19 update very soon. I don't know if she'll do it before the board meeting this week or after the board meeting this week. And it will have some information about the spring semester. If I were clairvoyant and going to share what I think might happen for the spring semester, I imagine it may look much like it does now, because we will have a difficult time really knowing very much about how we might be able to shift in the spring in time for us to give people time to actually do that. So if I were clear, if I had any kind of forethought about it, it would be, we would largely look like we do now, but we would start to assess if there's good news around people being able to be in spaces, that we might look at that next level of courses that were very difficult to convert to online. And we might look for ways, if we could do it safely, to offer those. But at the moment, I believe what I'm hearing from most of all y'all is we need to know. We need to plan for our classes. They are very different when they're in person versus online. And so we need to be able to do that. So many, many conversations ahead. And I'm actually looking forward to visiting with the Academic Senate next week at your meeting, Manuel. And hopefully even by then, maybe we'll have a little bit of information and we can start to talk about, how do we really get our arms around this ever-changing environment we find ourselves in, and how do we provide some stability for us and for our students at the same time so they continue to feel connected to us in ways that are meaningful. So, all right, with that, I am going to transition us over to our panel. And again, I want to thank Cloris and Manuel and Leroy and Takima. And I'm going to turn it over to Janae to actually more formally introduce our panel. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Sawubona, everyone. I just wanted to just say good afternoon and thank you, President Pam. So again, our theme is addressing racial inequality, our focus on anti-Blackness. And I just want to say thank you to President Pam for continuing the conversation during this forum. I also put a link in the chat for bit.ly /Mesa Loft Online so that you can also look for other opportunities for professional learning to participate in. So with that said, I would like the panelists to share a little bit about themselves before we open up the discussion. And so I will just, if someone is ready, I can call on you, but if you want to just unmute and speak, then that is also fine too. So I see Leroy and Manuel, just so that you don't clash.
Manuel.
Okay.
Sure, I'm happy to start. First of all, welcome everybody. My name is Manuel Velez. I am the Academic Senate President at San Diego Mesa College. I'm also a professor of Chicana and Chicano Studies here. Let me take a quick moment, first of all, to recognize Pam as well and thank her very much for setting up this forum, for making anti-Blackness the center of our focus for the upcoming year. I want to say very quickly, dealing with and dismantling systemic racism is a difficult job, a very difficult job. But when you have an administrator who is an equity avenger and who is committed to working to solve those, it makes the job much easier. So thank you, Pam.
I'll go next. Hi, my name is Leroy Johnson. I'm chair of the counseling department. Janae was asking me for a real quick bio. My other big sentence was I've been here for like 25 years. Mesa is a fantastic place to be. I think everybody really enjoys being here. We have a great situation and we need to make it better. That would be what I'd like to share.
Thank you.
I guess I'll go next. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Yebo Sawabona. My name is Takima Mayasa. I have the absolute pleasure of being the chair of the Black Studies Department here at San Diego Mesa College. I've been here with the community college district for, oh geez, now about 30 years. And what I love about being at Mesa is the family environment and the willingness of our administration, Pam, in this particular instance, Constance, when she was here, of not only dealing with difficult issues when it calls for that, but to be consistent in the effort so that as we move forward with success-mindedness, whatever that is, however long it takes for us to do that. So again, welcome everybody, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this panel.
Next. Hi, I'm Cloris Johnson. I've been at Mesa for about 4 years. I started in President Luster's office. Now I'm an instructional office specialist and co-chair of the Equity Task Force. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So I just wanted to share also that we've created a few questions to begin. And so please also feel free to add questions to the Q&A, and I just invite the panelists to feel free to check those as well if you want to respond by typing in an answer. And so with that said, I just would like to pass it over to President Luster to share the first question. Thank you.
Thank you, Janae. And I really, I want to start by centering this on, the trauma is real right now. The trauma is ever present. We saw with the shooting of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin that just happened within the last, 48 hours, that the assault and the trauma in terms of our community is real. And so as our students and as all of us come into this community, it is very much with that idea that their safety and survival in many cases is not something they can depend on, because they don't see that as part of their reality. And so as a white woman of privilege, both positional privilege and socioeconomic privilege and white privilege, I think for us as accomplices and allies, to truly engage in listening to our colleagues and our peers and those that are having these experiences, it's time for us to be quiet in terms of listening. It's not time for us to be quiet in terms of being complacent. And so that's an interesting line to walk, but I would ask all of us to consider walking it from whatever vantage point we have, because we can all be impactful in this work. So I just want to say that, the trauma is real. It's right in front of us. It continues to be traumatic. And so as we do this work, it's absolutely contemporary and important every moment that we do it. So I just wanted to frame some things in that way, if I could. Our first question is, what are the steps you personally take in striving to be equitable and inclusive? And I am going to start with Manuel on this question. And the other panelists can chime in as they would like to.
Okay, so let me give a caveat. First of all, the topics that we're discussing are certainly things that are very, very close to me, obviously as a Chicano studies professor, but certainly also as a person of color. So if I wind up talking too long, please, by all means, let me know. And certainly if I get too personal, I do apologize ahead of time as well. And I've been thinking a lot about this question. I think of all the questions that were being asked, this is the one that has really made me stop and think a lot. So I want to kind of see if I can tell you very quickly a little bit about myself in relation to this question. Way back in 1993, when I was a 25-year-old Chicano, straight Chicano male, and I have to emphasize this, when I was a straight Chicano male back in 1993, I started the graduate program at the University of Texas at El Paso. And during that time, we were able to discuss a lot of texts. So certainly, I was a part of the bilingual writing program. So much of the texts that we were looking at were by Chicano authors or by border authors. And the two texts that I remember that were the most profound for me were Josefina Lopez's Simply Maria, which was a play that was published in 1987, and Gloria Anzaldua's Borderlands, La Frontera, which was actually published in that same year. When I was a graduate student in '93, both of those texts were at the center of a lot of our conversations and a lot of our discussions. And the reason for that was because both of those texts, in a lot of ways, shook up the Chicano literary as well as the Chicano artistic and Chicano intellectual world, because they both revealed the machismo and the sexism inherent within the Chicano community. Simply Maria, if you're familiar with that play, was one of the very first plays to openly expose what the life was, what the daily life was like for Chicanas growing up in very patriarchal homes. And it was very, very resoundingly clear. And it was a message that was very much embraced by many Chicanas who had never seen their story being told on stage or on paper or anything such as that. Of course, us Chicano males, and I include myself in this part, we reacted very defensively to it. And we rejected it. We argued that it wasn't Chicano literature. We argued that it was white feminism and thus was against Chicano movement, and we rejected it. And I did the same thing happened with Borderlands La Frontera, Gloria Anzaldua's book, which was today, and we recognize what an amazing work it is. But our reaction as straight Chicano men was to reject the book, to be defensive about it, and to not even embrace it as a form of Chicano literature. Now, what happened for me is that as I moved on in my career, I had a relationship, especially with Anzaldua's book, partly because as I was becoming a Chicano professor, that book remained prominent in all of my discussions and in all of my courses, but also because that book, it was, in some ways, it affected me, even though outwardly or superficially, I rejected it. Specifically, Anzaldua's argument or Anzaldua's perspective on the new mestiza consciousness, or what she refers to as Nepantla. And I don't want to get too much into philosophy. Take my class if you're interested in it. But Nepantla, I think the closest way we can associate it is with liminality, right? If you understand liminality in literature, it's the idea of studying characters who exist within borders or who exist within transitional moments. For Anzaldúa, Nepantla is a space where we exist outside of or absent of binaries. And so it's this moment where we are everything at once, right? We are Black and we are white, we are male and we are female, we are gay and we are straight. And that idea resounded with me, I think, at a subconscious level more than I realized that it did. And as I began to really look at that theory, and as I began to kind of think about it more, I began to apply it to my own personal self. And it allowed me to really begin to explore my identity. And I started to understand that my identity as a Chicano straight male was one that depended upon the straight and the male in order for the Chicano to exist. And it was in this interesting way, my Chicano identity placed me as the form of the oppressed. And I could never be an oppressor, right? Because I'm a Chicano. And the male straight part then, for me, as a Chicano then, the male straight was not an oppressive identity for me. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody. Because I'm Chicano, then me being male doesn't make me sexist, right? Because I'm Chicano, then me being straight doesn't make me homophobic because I am an oppressed person. But I think that Anzaldúa made me realize that that's incorrect, that is not actually true. That both Anzaldúa and Lopez made me realize that as a Chicano male, I do have a position of privilege over Chicana women. The story that Lopez was telling on the play, in the stage, was true. And I recognize that story because I lived that story. I lived that story as a Chicano male growing up in a Mexican home. I lived that story watching my mother, my sister, and my aunts doing the same things that were present in Lopez's play, so much that I couldn't ignore it. And it made me realize then that my position as a Chicano then was not one that I was always oppressed. Anzaldúa's play had a much more profound on me in terms of my sexuality, because it made me realize that this idea of being a straight male was also something that I had embraced in many ways to affirm or to, and here's where I get really personal, to blur my own questions about my sexuality or my own questions about my masculinity. I know that as I grew up, I was always told that I was too effeminate. And I know that I try to hide that in many ways. And so I think I embrace these notions of a straight male in order to hide those notions of femininity within me. Anzaldúa's book allowed me to enter this space of Nepantla, so that I could erase those identities and recognize my own sexuality, not as a straight male. Today I identify as a bisexual male. And it's because of my ability to enter into that space of Nepantla and to begin to erase these notions of straight male or even of masculine versus feminine. And the most beautiful part of that is that once you can enter that into that space, you then become a bridge to these other communities. You can then begin to empathize with other communities. I look back to when I was a high school student and when I was a college student, and I'm ashamed of my homophobia. And I'm ashamed of how I exhibited that homophobia. But being able to enter into the Nepantla made me realize where that homophobia was stemming from. And it allowed me then to deal with it and to heal from it. And so that then drives me today. And I apologize again if this is getting way personal and way long, but that's what drives me today, is this idea then that who we are is certainly beyond the social constructions that define or restrict our identities. And that if we can enter a space where we're outside of those social constructions, we can then begin to bond with others, because we begin to erase the barriers that divide us. And we begin to empathize. And by empathizing, we harmonize. And by harmonizing, we synthesize. And for me, then that's if you will, that's the work that I try to do. And as an ethnic studies professor, it allows me to introduce these ideas to my students and hopefully teach my students to also be able to enter into that space of Nepantla, to heal themselves and to heal our society. I apologize if that was too personal and too long, but there's my answer to the question.
Thank you. I just wanted to, some people were interested in the books, Manuel. I found one, but could you tell me the other one? I found Gloria's book, but if you could mention the name of the other book. Please.
The other one is Simply Maria by Josefina Lopez. It's actually a play.
Oh, okay. Simply. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any of our other panelists want to answer that question?
Yeah, I would like to. When I think of the steps that I take personally, striving to be equitable and inclusive, it's kind of a difficult thing for me personally, because I kind of, and I think a lot of people feel that equality is what we're after. And it's a different sort of a mindset to look at equity and to look at people and say, wow, I don't really want to treat everybody the same way. If I treat a Black student the same way that I treat a white student, I'm not recognizing that the wholeness of that person as a Black student. And so I think that is kind of at the basis of the anti-Blackness piece for me, is being able to look at others and I could tag on to what Manuel said. I'm not as eloquent as Manuel, but I think, it's being able to show empathy for people, to realize that we're not all the same. One of the best things we can do as an individual is to realize that and to treat people as individuals. And we kind of skirt around that, and we talk about it, but putting it into practice, in our myself as a counselor or as a professor or as a person dealing with other people, it's a real challenge. It's always a challenge. And I think that's the challenge that I deal with. I think that's the challenge I think everyone deals with, is how do I make that kind of a movement to really see someone as an individual and see that they need to be treated differently. And for us to be successful with a movement towards equity is to put those people front and center, to put those Black students front and center and say, we all know, we've seen all the data, we have lots of numbers. We had a student services equity meeting yesterday, and that was our finishers. Like, we've got tons of numbers. We know Black students are not being treated well, this is not going well, and what are we going to do about it is really what our question is. And putting together real concrete action plans, I think is what I'd like everybody to focus on. And that's what I'm going to focus on, and I would want all of us to do something similar. That'd be my piece.
Okay, well, I'd like to take and address that question a little bit. And I'd like to do it just from a little different kind of angle. And part of equity mindedness to me personally has to deal with getting to know people and students. First of all, I know myself. So I want to start there. Knowledge of self is the first place to being able to find equity with other people. And as Leroy and Manuel said, you know, you have to be able to know what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and then to be able to communicate with people and find out and to bridge, okay, well, who are they? How do they see themselves? What is it that they need? And in that exploration, right, we're moving to a place in a space that equity to me looks like diversity. So let me explain what that means. Diversity meaning that that we don't have to fit into a particular box or a socially identified reality that proves who and what we are, right? Now, that's important because each and every one of us in achieving who the best of who we are and what we can become starts with that understanding that whatever that it is and how I come to that is something that I may not even know. Internalized racism, for example, is very detrimental to how we take and deprive ourselves of being equitable when we compare ourselves to someone else's standard of what beauty is, someone else's standard of what success is, etc. I remember, and Manuel, as you were speaking, it took me back to my days at San Diego State University, and I remember telling my parents the experiences that I had in Black Studies department that allowed me to see myself from a different lens, right? That allowed me to see myself from a person who could explore what was important to me. I remember thinking, and we've had these conversations here, even on our campus, about things like the pathways and how should students take and get their degrees and things like that. As someone who is, I like to think of myself as multi-talented, it was very difficult for me to decide on a particular major to have when there were many things that I was interested in. My father was an engineer, you know, I was an artist at heart. And so I explored a lot of different things before I discovered that Black Studies allowed me to take and invest in all of those things, that I could discover the best of myself in all of those things. And I had the pleasure of mentored by Dr. Shirley Weber. That was many, many years ago. She was the chair of San Diego State University's Black Studies Department for 40 years. And I use her as an example because, you know, when I thought of myself as a woman who had a young woman who had very long hair, and I had always been told, oh, you have this beautiful, long, healthy thing of hair. And I remember how liberating it was for me to just cut it all off. And so part of being equitable is also helping students be true to themselves, finding their own identity in terms of what works for them, not just academically, but holistically as well too. And so, and I don't want to go on and on, but I'll end my conversation with this in terms of why that's important. Because when we talk about helping people, it's not just their own motivation, but recognizing who they are, appreciating that, and giving them the tools that will allow them to take and be successful. When Dr. Shirley ran for office, and she was asked, I remember very vividly, she was asked to run for office because there was a lack of voice, right there in politics and education. And I remember telling my students in class that with ethnic studies, you could do anything, that you didn't have to have a degree in politics to have a valid place and a voice for that. And so part of being equitable is understanding that no matter who you are and what you do, and this is something that I applied to myself as someone who just recently finished my doctorate degree as well. And I had to tell myself that it was okay that I didn't finish when everybody else did, that it was okay that I was doing something completely out of the box. And so, but I still needed to give myself love in that equity. So my message to our students is that love yourself and know that we love you. And that part of that equity means that nothing can stop you from being who, whenever, what you are, and to always be willing to take and strive to be the best of yourself. And when you do that, you'll achieve what it is that you need. Equity will be a part of that.
Thank you, Dr. Mayasa. And I believe, Janae, you have the next question.
Okay. Thank you. So the next question is, how do you hold yourself accountable if you notice you or someone else is being inequitable or racially insensitive?
I think it's our duty to say something. No matter who you are, you should say something. And I think also, I always pay attention to the setting. I remember having an event and a woman got up, she had one of the best speeches, but in the middle of the speech, it started to become racially motivated. And we went to the front and we were able to wrap it up pretty fast, but we were able to have this conversation with her of why that's not acceptable. And I feel like we have to, sometimes when we're speaking in anger, it becomes an argument. Nobody's listening. I want you to hear what I have to say to you. But I think when you educate someone of, this is why this is insensitive, because there's also a thing that are unconscious bias where, these are things that people have heard and, it's been a belief for so long that they don't even realize some things that they do. So I think that educating someone on what they're doing and how it's hurtful, and I think you'll get a better response and an understanding, and they may think twice about doing it later on. I also have something to say about the unconscious biases, because I feel that as we mature, we're all accountable for that as well. I think it's easy to see what everyone else is doing, and it's easy to speak on that, but I think we all have a duty to look within ourselves, and it starts with us first. And that's kind of the work that I'm doing even on myself, is that it starts with us first. And we have to think about the things that we've heard generationally from our friends, from our teachers, and things that we have learned to believe along the way. Start questioning those things. Some of them may be great. Some of them may be great. But some of them may not apply for what is happening today. And you really need to say, like, is this who I want to be? Like, how do I fix this? What are the steps to fix this? So I think that for me being accountable, I don't have a problem saying something, but I also feel that there are people who won't say anything. And so I will talk to the person, and I'll try to do it especially to educate them. But I also want to talk to the person who is feeling bad about whatever is being said about them. I think it's important to work with both. But I still think that we all have a duty to start from ourselves and start working. We can't change it until we fix who we are and some of these beliefs that we have, and some of these beliefs that have been going on for generations. And that's for everyone. And I think once we fix ourselves and what's going on there, the steps to change, that's where it's going to start. So that is my part for being held accountable.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share?
I'll add a couple of things to that. I agree with Cloris that it has to begin with ourselves and look at ourselves in terms of accountability. I would add to that that we also have to recognize that in many situations, we're simply just not aware. And Cloris used the term unconscious bias, and that's absolutely accurate. If I go back to myself as a high school student or a young college student, I certainly would not have believed that I was being homophobic, even though I was expressing this terrible homophobia. So I would say that one is to recognize, I think, in some ways that you may be exhibiting unconscious behavior, and certainly always listen when somebody brings it up. So as Cloris says, if someone comes up to you and says, hey, well, what you're saying is offensive, what you're saying is bad, allow the opportunity to see them as correct, right? Allow yourself to listen to them and allow yourself to accept what they're saying is correct, and allow yourself to question whether or not you are exhibiting that particular behavior. I think that's important, because I didn't recognize that I was being homophobic. When I was using, the words that were homophobic, I thought I was simply participating in what was normal behavior. And certainly it was, right? At that time, it was very normalized behavior to use those terms. But I needed to, first of all, I needed to recognize that unconsciously I was exhibiting that behavior, and I needed somebody to point it out to me, definitely.
And to piggyback on that, Manuel, I went to, there's a store that I go to every week, and I always buy everything we need for the house every week. And I started to notice there was a change, and I noticed that every time I would come up with a basket full of groceries, she would always make it seem like I needed government assistance to pay for these groceries, and she would make that kind of clear. And I said, you know, the first day it kind of caught me off guard. Well, the second time she did it, oh, why did you say that? Like, you know, it's not that there's a problem, but how did you pick me? Because now I'm watching the people ahead of me, and you didn't ask them that same question. I'm noticing that it's specifically to me. And then, and she goes, oh, it's policy. Well, the supervisor said, no, it's not policy. That's not the case. But then another cashier asked me the same thing. I said, oh boy, you know, and I wanted to get an idea. And so I talked to her about microaggression. We had a good long conversation of, to me, what you're saying to me is that a young African Black woman cannot afford these groceries, that every time I come in here, that this is what we're saying. But yet, my really good friend who's not Black was in front of me. You didn't ask her those questions. And so I feel like after talking to management, also talking to the cashiers, that policy changed, because I felt like it was offensive and hurtful of saying like, we can't afford this, or we can't afford groceries. And I feel like it changed within that store completely, because I'll be honest with you, that was the only store that did it. And they have a chain. And so it changed the policy so that other people, whether it be Hispanic, any person of color, or whoever they're doing this to, will not have to experience that again.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing too, is that, you know, when I think of being in situations where somebody's being insensitive, if I can do something, that's great, but sometimes it's kind of overwhelming just on your own. I'm thinking of situations that have happened here at the school, just in terms of social media, and it does get kind of exhausting. So my words to people are to look for some help. We have lots of folks here who can help you. You know, I don't think you can spend or would want to spend a lot of your time and a majority of your time chasing down comments on social media or things that you think were wrong. If you can stop them when they happen, that's great. But I think look for help. We've got lots of places for help. Some of the meetings I've been to, I've heard faculty members express things going on in their classes, and we have a whole system that can provide help. We have a system to, you know, redress what is wrong happening that a student is creating, and to be able to assist you. So we want to use our system to be able to modify what's happening, because there's a lot of things that are going on. We're in a really strange time. If we look at COVID-19, we look at all the things that are happening in race relations, if we look at the elections, we're in a sociologist's, you know, prize time of all of the things that are happening, and things are happening and mixing in ways that we have no ideas what's going on. That's the beauty of life. Most of it happens, you know, what the heck's going on? You know, you got to do it. You know, you have to get through here somehow. And we do. And I would like people to look for some help. There are lots of places out there to get help. So always think of the places that you can help.
If I could just jump in, just for a moment, if that's okay. I'm not on the panel, but I just wanted to share something that came to me that I was thinking of, and it's just a quote from an article written by Dr. William Smith and a woman. I can't think of her name at the moment, but I'll put it in the chat. And so it says, invariably, Black college women in historically and predominantly white spaces become prone to experience racial battle fatigue as they attempt to reconcile these images with their own selfhood in the face of numerous racial macro and microaggressions and misogynoir. Pierce observed that in identifying racial discrimination, we must not look for the gross and obvious. The subtle, cumulative mini assault is the substance of today's racism. The offensive mechanism of racism and the enormity of the complications they cause can be appreciated only when one considers that these blows are delivered incessantly. It is the unrelenting nature of racial discrimination, whether subtle or overt, that constitutes racial microaggressions. Racial microaggressions, therefore, can be both inconspicuous and difficult to confirm racial slights and more obvious and overt attacks that become recurrent indignities and irritations and unfair treatment, which escalate to stigmatization, hypersurveillance, low expectations, and personal threats or attacks on one's well-being. And that was a long quote, but I like the quote because I think what we're discussing, and just from what Manuel said and how he did some self-awareness, Cloris said that she noticed something. She also did this self-awareness, just as Leroy and Takima have said. And so oftentimes I think when it comes to educating ourselves, like Manuel referred to Gloria's book and how it became kind of a lens for him to view certain things, is that sometimes these things aren't obvious, right? But to the person, they may feel obvious. And so having the dialogue like this is an opportunity for us to discuss, but then also educating ourselves about it through professional learning, which we have some of these things. We've had microaggressions. We'll continue to open some of those things up again, unconscious bias, but just also not just learning it as a intellectual training, but also just, you know, using it as a way to self-reflect, because sometimes just even as myself, one thing that I learned about equity, that it wasn't just color, right? It was like, as Pam mentioned, you know, I'm a cisgendered woman, right? That's a privilege, right? Because I identify, so someone who is trans maybe is judged because they identify as a woman, but the world may judge them because they don't see them through that lens. So then that is a privilege that I hold, that I was not, that I became aware of. So something like that, that I'm able-bodied, right? I can physically do certain things, but someone else who, you know, so not being equitable in the sense that I could be judging it, even if it's just not race related, but that there are other ways that we can see the world because we don't have certain issues or discomforts when it comes to certain things like race or if it comes to sexuality or whatever. So then we can't always see it as easily. So then we have to be, you know, interrogate ourselves, is what I'm hearing from them, is that they have consciousness of that. So I just wanted to share that when it's not overt, it doesn't mean that it's not there, but it just means that we sometimes have to be aware to recognize that if someone is saying they feel a certain way, then maybe we can give them the space, you know, to share how they feel. So I just wanted to just share that because the dialogue was good. Thank you.
I'll just add really briefly. I'll just add really briefly to that. We've had MK Asante come to our campus several times over the years recently. And one of the things that he says is that if you make an observation, you have an obligation. I said it again. If you make an observation, you have an obligation. You have an obligation to speak out about that. And, you know, and there's different ways that we can speak out and address things. Sometimes the speaking out to or about something requires compassion, helping people to see the unconscious bias, exploring and asking them questions. Well, why did you say that comment? Or why did you do that? Because oftentimes my colleague in Black Studies, Professor Star Lewis, will say that hurt people hurt people. And so generally, sometimes the oppression that's happening or is being delivered isn't really about the person that is being given to, as opposed to something happened within the person who's giving it, right? And so there's lots of different ways and a lot of different things that we have to look at. Now that's by no means to take away from the oppression that people get in various types of ways. And so part of accountability means calling things out, being compassionate when the situation calls for that, but also not being afraid, right, to deal with things head on. Because there have been situations that I had, you know, on campus and off campus, frankly, where there have been, you know, tensions that have flared and people didn't want to hear, you know, what was happening for different reasons. And so now we're in a place, and Leroy, you just said this, was that we're in a time period where people are being forced to deal with and to hear things that they didn't want to hear before, or do things about things that they didn't want to do things about before. And so now we have a global situation, not just a situation of anti-Blackness, not just against, you know, transgender or the LGBT community, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're being forced, right, as a people on the planet to deal with some things that we have failed to deal with before. And so part of our accountability as a community of people and global citizens is to be aware. And I want to thank you, Pam, for providing these platforms so that we can have open, honest discussions about what do we do differently than what's happened before, because what we did before didn't work. So we can't go back to that norm. We have to create a new norm that's more inclusive. And what does that look like? And that means being willing to hear, being willing to see, and being willing to act. And this is just the beginning with these kinds of forums and places and spaces.
So that leads perfectly into our next question, which I'm going to actually point towards Leroy, because you referred to this a little bit even when you were introducing yourself. What is your vision for our campus community to advance our work in racial equity and anti-Blackness? You talked a little bit about the counseling consortium and the doing, you know, that you guys are, you know, our students are struggling. What are we going to do? So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I have, my vision is, you know, it's a long lasting vision. I see that we have a great assortment of people. We've got our instructional side of our campus. We've got our student services side. I see the two sides working together and being able to create some real equitable items, equitable action items that are done in classrooms, that are done in counseling offices, that are done in admissions offices, and that we work together to be able to do those things. And I know there are tons of things happening. You know, when I talk to people, this is a time for action. Like Ashanti said, this is a call to action for people. And I think people are ready to respond and put together action plans. And, you know, we of course have our equity areas in our program reviews, and that's good, but I really think they need to step up, right? We've got a counseling equity committee, and we've had meetings and said, hey, we should put our equity statement first, right? We shouldn't have it buried where you have to go through 2 web pages to find it. It should be the first thing you see on everybody's web page. When you go to a web page, it should be, are we gonna treat specific populations in the best way possible so that all of us can have a better environment? That should be upfront. And that's kind of what my dream is, my vision for the future, for that to be able to be, and I know we could do it. I know we're moving towards it, and I know it involves places or things like Guided Pathways movement and our academic senate, and I know it involves our classified senate and our classified professionals. And you know, I always have to remind myself, oh yeah, I mentioned this to our counseling classified people. You're actually our first responders. Our classified folks are our first responders. You're the first people that deal with students. Most of the time you pick up a phone or you're seeing somebody, or, you know, you're the first contact. That first student contact is huge. And we should never forget that. We should never forget how important that is to the whole vision of equity here at Mesa College. So I see us all fitting together, but with some real powerful equity action plans.
Thank you. Others?
I could jump in. So for me, when I was thinking about the answer to this question, I think I was envisioning a more kind of utopic idea of what would be the perfect college campus for me. I want to answer kind of in 2 ways. I think first, in terms of the physical space itself, and I think that's an important thing to discuss, is what would a college campus look like? One that is committed to equity and diversity and all of those things. And for me, it goes to the idea of the college campus has to reflect the communities that exist within that campus. And I mean by community, certainly the students that come and take classes and that you know, interact on our college campuses, but I also mean the community that the campus itself sits on, right? So for Mesa College, that's the Linda Vista community. And I think that a college campus should visibly reflect the cultures of those communities. One of the interesting things, and what I'm talking about certainly, again, is kind of theoretical, as I am a cultural studies scholar, so I kind of do these things. If you look at, when I first started at San Diego Mesa College, the buildings were old, they were not that good looking, but there were murals throughout the buildings, and the murals reflected the cultural diversity and the cultural, you might say, pride of the students who attended the colleges. Chicano Studies actually several years ago did a panel presentation on the murals themselves and how the murals reflected the history of San Diego Mesa College. And what has happened since I began there is that the buildings that house those murals have disappeared, right? And they've been replaced with some modern buildings, some very beautiful buildings, buildings that have won a lot of awards, buildings that are technologically advanced and so on and so forth, but that in many ways attempt to not show a cultural identity and thus attempt to show a more kind of neutral presentation of the campus. And I say this with all due respect, because I know that some of the ideas about what's happening here come from some of us here in the college itself. But what's interesting is that those murals ultimately disappeared. They are preserved, right? You can find smaller versions of it in the library or in the student services building. But what's interesting is that now when you walk on the campus, they're not visible. You have to kind of look for those images. And so the campus now has taken on a more image that's absent of any kind of cultural identity. And again, I say this with all due respect. For me, one of the funniest things about this entire transformation is that if you go onto campus from in between the Mesa Commons and the gym, right in front of the C-store and the entrance to the bookstore, there are some stones that are placed there in front of the garden that have etched words such as, diversity and so on and so forth. And again, I find it a little ironic, being somebody who studies signs, that we've replaced these beautiful murals that were painted by the students with these Helvetica words that say diversity. And unfortunately, I think that's an interesting message that we're giving. So for one, I think it's the physical space, right? How does the physical space actually visually reflect the students who attend our classes and our colleges? And the second one, I think, goes back to something that I had said before, right? I think that we need to empower our students. We need to give them the tools, and we need to do it with intentionality to dismantle the structures of racism that dictate their lives and that certainly, again, impact us in very negative ways. Unfortunately, colleges and universities function in many ways to preserve and strengthen those structures. And we need to be intentional about our ability to empower our students in ways that they can go out and actually dismantle those structures. I know that's a long one, a hard one, but that would be the perfect college campus.
Okay, well, I'd like to jump in, and I'd like to take this a little deeper, if we could. I appreciate what
let's go down the rabbit hole. Let's go down the rabbit hole, Takima.
Let's go down the rabbit hole a little bit. What I do, again, also, I appreciate these conversations, because these are conversations that are, it's not that we haven't had them, but I think that we're having them in a different kind of way, and that's a good thing. And part of, really dealing with the issue of equity, so that it's eradicated, right? It's one thing, like, Malcolm X says, you stick me with a knife 6 inches and you pull it out over only 3, I still have 3 inches worth of knife that are still in me. But yeah, it came out, but the whole thing didn't come out. And so the whole healing hasn't occurred the way that it could and should, et cetera. And so part of, when I have a vision for our campus is to continue, first of all and foremost, to continue to take this conversation seriously. And we are, not just as a campus, but as a society as well. We're starting to take it really seriously in ways that we haven't done before. And that's in depth, not just in surface, right? In addition to that, to understand that equity for all doesn't mean less equity for others. And that's part of, I think, the misnomer and the fear, right? That's part of the xenophobia around having these equity conversations, is that if we really get to the truth of it, that people of African descent and higher education in society and the microaggressions that they experienced and racism through their workplace, through their school place, and other types of things, that when we talk about healthcare and the the disproportionate deaths that are happening and COVID-19, all these kinds of things, irregardless of your privilege, if you're people of color, right? That you still are not privileged in terms of your health because the issues of racism and discrimination that undermine your health. And so you could have the best healthcare in the world, but then if you die because of the effects of the microaggressions and things that get to you, then that's an issue that you can't see, but it's certainly happening. And it is affecting us physically, spiritually, mentally, and other types of things. In addition to that, addressing it's not just making things visible, right? But it's about dealing with the things that are ignored, that are dismissed, that are discounted. It means having a better understanding that when, you know, if I'm in a place and I'm making a point and it hurts to hear that, then that means something. And unfortunately, when we have to deal with situations where it hurts to hear something from people, because oftentimes people don't want to perceive themselves as being the perpetrator of whatever the hurt is that's coming through the voice of the people that are being most impacted by that. And it's not always that you did something, as opposed to, and we've said this in this conversation today, that it is real and it is happening. And then the question becomes, if it was happening to you, would you want somebody to hear you? Would you want somebody to help you? And how would you change that, right? And not just say that it's something that, you know, people are complaining about and, you know, get over it, that slavery is dead and, you know, it's not that way anymore. Pam, you just said in the last 48 hours, a man, and I want to say this, I want to take a minute to say this, because I was looking online yesterday and I was like, okay, well, what happened? What was the situation? There was a call for domestic violence and he wasn't even involved with the domestic violence call. He was trying to split it up, and it took me 10 articles to find that information. All the other 9 just said that something happened, but there was one that gave more explicit information, right? And having accurate information is important, that he was helping these 2 ladies because they were having a dispute over the car key, scratching the car, and he got shot 8 times and is paralyzed at this point in front of his 3 sons that were in the car. And we can say, oh, that's horrible, you know, that shouldn't have happened, but it did. Where did it happen? In America. What time period? 21st century. That means something. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. When I had a student call me and talk about his cousin who got killed, and he said, why should I go back to school? What? Because my life, and I don't know if I'm going to live another day. To be frank, why should I do that? So part of the vision is to continue to tell our students that they matter, that we love them and not be afraid. That's called affective learning, right? Showing the students that we care. And Leroy, you talked about the systems and the structures. And we have to also say, when the systems and structures don't work, that we call it out, not in a negative way, but in a diversified way, to say, let's do this. And I appreciate the student services. I need to get a shout out to Dean Maxey, Dr. Hands, and others who, when I make the call and I say, you know what, there's a challenge that I'm having with students, can you help me? And Leroy, you said this, find the people who can help you, and they do. And our campus does those things. And we all have to do that and not be frustrated by the inconvenience, right? And I want to say that because we all get frustrated by the inconvenience of having to stop what we're doing for the teaching to deal with these other issues so that we can go back to that. But if we don't do that, we might lose the students overall. So there's a lot of work to be done. I wanted to say that I'm grateful to be a part of Mesa College in our efforts to be open to have these conversations and dialogues, and to the effort that's going on to take and address these needs. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but I think we're up to the challenge, and living up to what we say that we are is is essential. As the leading college of equity and excellence, putting our money where our mouth is and our actions to, what we say is very essential for people to take us seriously. And I'm grateful to be a part of that effort to do that.
Well, Takima, that is going to have to be the last word for this time, because we have reached the end of, and thank you for so eloquently taking us home, because that was beautiful. And I think at the end of the day, if we're talking about loving our students and looking for help and help-seeking behavior, if we model that with one another, then our students see that that's part of what our expectations are. We don't expect anyone to do Mesa College by themselves, whether you're an employee or a student or anybody else. We're in it to win it together. So I do want to say that that we were really excited to have Ahmed Muhammad, who joined us for the convocation. He's working today, so it's good. We want Ahmed to be able to go to his job today. But I did want to lift up a new series that's starting that's called Propelled by Protest. And this is an effort for student-facilitated discussions. And it is a group of individuals on campus that have put this information together. We just got the flyer, and so we're going to be posting it on the web, and we'll definitely get it out to all of you. But on September the 2nd is the first workshop, and it's from 5 to 6:30. It's called Sharing Our Experiences, and there will be 5 convenings, all facilitated by students, which I think is a fantastic idea. And we've been asked to direct questions to Dr. Veronica Gerasi, Dr. Ediama. Okay, Ediama, I'm going to foul up your last name, so I'm going to say Dr. Ediama, our awesome Dr. Ediama, who's in our library, and also Dr. Judy Sundayo. And Ediama, I will learn your last name. And so I just want to say thank you to our panelists today. I hope that we will take advantage of more of these opportunities. We will have a schedule out. Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer, for posting it. So if you look in the chat right now, you can see that it's on our Mesa Facebook page, and you'll be able to see it there. And again, thank you for your time. Janae, thank you for the planning and effort that it takes to put into this. Thank you to our comms and President's Office crew for having our backs to do all the tech and support. And just want to say to all of you, thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you at our next community forum. Thank you, everyone.